Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank powered by Celsius Beverage. This is your first time tuning in. Catch these shows live every week right around 1 o'clock on our Instagram account at Shrimp Tank Boca, our YouTube account, and our Facebook account. Every week we come to you with the best and brightest entrepreneurs from South Florida. Always find the do's and don'ts of running a business. And of course, we are partnered with the Florida Atlantic University, their Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. So, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cox. Kevin, what is happening at FAU right now?
It's still the summer, so things are a little bit slower. There's plenty of parking, which is nice for our guests, and but we're gearing up for some really exciting stuff this fall. The Florida Atlantic University Executive Education Department is going to be hosting the NobleCon conference, and there's going to be some exciting pitch competitions and some of the sharks from the Shark Tank.
Oh, you guys secured them?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be coming to FAU to listen to some of our entrepreneurs pitch.
That's pretty exciting. And we get them on the Shrimp Tank as well while they're here, of course.
You can get them to do anything you want, but it's very expensive.
Costly. It's costly. You can't throw that in the contract somehow?
Yeah.
Be like, and also an episode on the Shrimp Tank. You just slide it in.
Yeah, I don't think
right?
so.
That's what I did with Celsius. When we partnered with them, I was like, and also both podcasts, the Owl podcast as well. Sometimes you just sneak it in and then just like, okay, sure, why not?
Yeah, their team doesn't really enable any sneak-ins.
No.
Let's
talk about parking for a second. When are we going to get our sign out there, right? We have guests arrive every week, right? Our show's getting larger and larger. Who do we talk to get a sign for the Shrimp Tank already? For our guests and us?
Well, it's interesting. I'll give everyone a peek behind the curtain. If you work here at FAU, right, to get a parking space, you have to pay for it. Yeah, so it's only $100-something for faculty, but if you wanted a designated parking space,
that's what we're talking about here. Yeah.
It comes at a low cost of $660 annually.
That's reasonable. I think we're okay with doing this. You split the cost with me, $300 or so each. We make our guests today pay, and then we'll invite them whenever they want to come join us on the Shrimp Tank. Hey, you could get one of our guests to sponsor this. Maybe Shrimp Tank, and powered by, and we just add another name, another sponsor, and then their names on that spot every single year.
Yeah,
for the low cost of $600.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was that cheap. I thought you were gonna say like 20,000-30,000. Like when I'm in New York City, it's like $50,000 to buy a parking spot, and this is a major university.
Yeah,
it's a bargain.
I feel like the hourly rate, because we paid like $7 for 3 hours.
No, right?
I mean, when you look at that economics there, it's seems pretty reasonable.
It sure is. Well, let's invite our guests to come join us on the show right now. We got Jason and Andrew joining us. Andrew's the CEO. Andrew's the COO. Jason is the CEO of Biostem Technologies. So we're excited to learn about their business and also their entrepreneurial journey. So we'll kick off with Jason. Jason, tell us a little bit about the business.
Sure. So Biostem Technologies was founded in 2014. We were focused on developing wound care products from perinatal tissue. You might ask yourself, what is perinatal tissue? It's pretty much anything umbilical cord, placental tissue, placental disc, amniotic fluid. So anything typically tissue from delivery of a baby. We work with a series of recovery agencies, actually one up in the Tallahassee area that recovers the tissue. And we process at our facility here just north of Fort Lauderdale and Pompano Beach. It's about 6,100 square feet. And we manufacture those products for end use of treating mostly Medicare beneficiaries for diabetic foot ulcers, pressure ulcers, venous leg ulcers, any sort of chronic wound that ends up happening on a patient. Typically, they're 65 and older, and that's why we focus on Medicare beneficiaries. Andrew and I co-founded the company in 2014. We were actually originally focused on regenerative medicine ex-US, which is kind of interesting. Our first site was actually in the Dominican Republic, and then moved on to having 2 other sites in Mexico City as well as Guadalajara, Mexico. And I'll leave Andrew to articulate around why the why behind the what in regards to why we started in regenerative medicine in the first place.
Yeah, go for it, Andrew.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. I think we've all heard Simon Sinek's book, or at least seen it online, with Start With Why. So
I love that guy, by the way.
Kind of, yeah. He's very, very motivational. Started part and parcel of the company, watching his TED Talks and just seeing the focus he had on certain things. But for us, the journey started. I was in the military before we started this company, and in 2011, my father had called me for he had to go get some treatments overseas. So he had a brain tumor. We had to go over to the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. He got some gray matter radiation therapy targeted in his brain. After that, left him with kind of stroke-like symptoms. So some swelling, impaired speech, a little bit of paralysis. And at that time, our sole focus, I had to go back in the military for a little while before I got out. But our focus became, researching regenerative medicine. At that time, stem cells was a hot topic. So we started looking up research for regenerative medicine companies. We found that the regulation in the U.S. wasn't quite there yet, so we looked ex-U.S. That led us to a company that was actually based out of Florida originally, and they had a treatment facility over in Dominican Republic. He received a series of treatments from them. It was all culture expanded or basically multiplied in another way, umbilical cord mesenchymal stem cells. And he had great successes, great results. So after a few series of those treatments and seeing a personal success story individually with my father's own health, and Jason and I will get probably to it later in the podcast, but have known each other since we were teenagers. We then decided to, instead of, start something new, acquire something that was already there. So my father, Jason, and myself, like you mentioned, bought the controlling interest of that company. And then from there have done many different things. And in the past, I'd say six or so years, what Jason kind of described of what we do with perinatal tissue allografts is our core focus right now.
So this is very important. Did you guys go to school for anything related to medicine, or you're like in marketing, finance, business?
Yeah, this all looks very technically complicated and very sciencey. So, yeah, what are your backgrounds and how does it relate to this?
I think that's what fits really well for this podcast, to be honest, because both Andrew and I have an engineering background, but Andrew served in the Marines, so in avionics, I believe, correct?
Yeah. Flightline stuff.
Yeah, and so both of our backgrounds are not in med tech or science, et cetera. And I think speaks to entrepreneurial spirit definitely around this podcast too, because I think we felt, to Andrew's point about the why, right? And what our mission was and what our passion was really around Andrew's father's experience and outcomes of that therapy, and why we felt strongly that we needed to get this out there and kind of move things forward and try to get folks to understand how to actually receive that type of therapy and then move forward and commercialize it and make it a business. So, but yeah, my background, like I said, I went to Milwaukee School of Engineering, mechanical engineering technology. So focusing on engineering using computer science-based methods as well as mathematics. Left there, went into kind of commercial world, focusing on material science projects for the DoD, really focusing on aerospace and defense work. And then to Andrew's point earlier in expressing, his father's experience with the treatments that he had, they contacted me and said, hey, we'd be interested in kind of looking at building, expanding a business. I was kind of getting sick of sitting at a desk, 40 hours a week, doing the grind. And my parents actually are both entrepreneurs, starting their own businesses as well. So kind of took the entrepreneurial bug and off we went.
That's awesome. Kevin, what are your thoughts about the myths around, like, you have to be in the medical field to then run companies like this? And that sounds so complex and so medical driven, right?
It's intriguing. Usually you would have someone near upper management, at least with some. That must be it's tricky, I imagine, but also comes with some benefits, right? Because a lot of times those technicians, scientists, people who work in medicine, they may not possess the skills necessary to run a business, and they become, primarily focused on the science, which makes sense, but sometimes that can cause a lot of problems, right? Like, I talk to a lot of folks. We've had medtech, biotech, pharma tech come through our new venture accelerator, and, a lot of times they'll catch me using the wrong language because I'll be saying something about, like, well, you got to think about the customers. And they're like, whoa, we don't have customers. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, patients, but they're still customers, right? Like, they just prefer kind of that terminology if they come from that space, but it's like, do they pay you for the thing? Okay, then like it's the same deal. But you must have to have a lot of trust in your scientific team, though, I imagine. How do you manage those aspects of it, right? If somebody comes up with a new idea for a new product or a new treatment or and they say, hey, we think we should pursue this, you must not really know, like, oh yeah, it seems promising, like it's kind of outside of your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, there should be some scientific staff and some people with experience, at least in the field, towards upper management. And we do have that. One thing about us too is, we're a public company as well. So there's two facets to running a public business. One is running a public company and all the stuff that comes along with that, financials, yada, yada. And then the other side is the operational side of creating products, developing products, manufacturing products. But we've, throughout the years, surrounded ourselves with a lot smarter people than us. And I think that's, what really got us here. I think the other side about not having the background that has kind of got us to this point where we're 10 years in and the company's starting to do very well is, just perseverance of not knowing everything or not knowing all the information of why you shouldn't do something. We've had to run into walls and figure out why not. And there's been experiences we've learned along the way, but we surround ourselves with smart enough people and luckily attorneys as well that have kept us here.
Yeah. So let's talk about something related to attorneys and company corporate structure, right? Our listeners always want to learn about things. So are you a public US company?
Yes.
Okay. But the regulatory framework in the US won't allow you to do the things that the company does here. How does that?
So yeah, I think where you're pointing to, and correct me if I'm mistracking or misunderstanding your question here, but so originally the company was doing ex-US treatments. So anytime you take a product and you add anything that either expands or changes the original characteristics of it, that becomes a drug. That you have to go through certain approval processes. What we were doing ex-US originally would have been a drug looked at in the US. It was all experimental. We had COFEPRIS approval, which is the Mexican version of the FDA, to be able to do certain things. If you do that in the US, it becomes a drug. What we do now is considered a tissue allograft. So it's the same concept as you would have a cadaveric tendon, skin, ligament, bone, anything like that. You're using the same purpose it was in the donor as it is in the recipient. So in this case, with placental tissue and wounds, like Jason mentioned, it's a protective barrier cover for the baby. It's a protective barrier cover for a wound.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar.
So that's why we kind of pivoted to what we did in the US.
Okay. So does the company no longer do the other aspects?
Correct.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we pivoted in 2018. We had an opportunity to acquire some assets from a PE firm here. Actually, the entity was here in South Florida. And so we had an opportunity to buy those assets, bring them into our facility, and then really change and pivot from a manufacturing perspective as well, manufacturing those products here at our facility. Andrew's done an amazing job with his team. We have to your point, we surrounded ourselves with a lot of, smart folks. Some have graduated from local Southeastern or South Florida universities. Dr. Wendy Weston, who's our PhD, VP of R&D, worked at University of Miami, worked at Nova as well. And then the rest of our operations teams, a lot of them actually have, some education here in South Florida for either biotech, engineering, et cetera.
Awesome. Very interesting. So this might be outside, well, this is outside the scope of your company now then, but I'm going to ask just because I'm curious. It seemed like those stroke-like symptoms from your dad's procedure, it sounded like that you couldn't get here and probably still can't get here was pretty effective. So can people still get that? Does that still exist? Where did that end up? Is it going through US approval or do you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that have looked because the FDA has what's called a BLA pathway, so biologics license application. So instead of an IND or an individual new drug or a new drug entity that's chemical, they have a biologics version of that. So there is a pathway for people or companies to submit those products for approval. There's quite a few companies that have done that. I think there were some announcements this morning that there are some BLAs being filed or approved to proceed in Alzheimer's indication. So there's some very good promise from these technologies. It's just a matter of, like any entrepreneurship or any company going along is funding and opportunity and what it takes to get there. It's not that we're not working on these things; they're just not commercially available yet.
And I think also too on the FDA or regulatory side framework, the FDA has done a really good job over the last, I'd say, even 5 years of developing the appropriate pathways. A lot of this stuff is novel, and definitely during the COVID times and situations of developing a microRNA vaccine has really accelerated forward some of these cellular therapies, viral technologies, et cetera, to kind of help further fund and develop the appropriate regulatory framework, and folks and team to actually get some of these things moving faster towards a process. So I think that's actually one value of COVID. It also too, like logistics wise, like transporting tissue or transporting drugs from a cold chain storage perspective, actually was a large benefit to COVID around cell therapies and things of that nature. So
Okay, I want to really dumb it down for our audience. Okay, I'm going to go backwards, right? I want to create a little bit of a timeline. Like, when did you buy the business, right? At that point, like, where was it, right? And how many employees approximately? And then how did you transition from those products to the ones I see on your website? I'm on your website right now. I see 4 products. When was that first one introduced? And just kind of go through like a timeline to where we are in 2024 in under 3 minutes, let's say. Okay.
Okay.
So
Go for
either
it,
one,
Andrew.
go for it.
I'll try to condense this pretty well. But so yeah, started in 2014. Originally, our goal, or we had ex-US, so medical tourism type treatments. That is a very arduous process of getting people down there, getting people comfortable with going outside the US to be able to do these treatments that are not inexpensive, and they're all cash pay. We realized that early on. We knew that going into it. So initially what we did was we repackaged pharmaceutical ingredients. So there was APIs, or active pharmaceutical ingredients. We knew there was a need for up level of quality in the supply to mom and pop compounding pharmacies, technical terms 503As or Bs.
Okay.
And that's what we did for a while. Then we knew that would bring in cash to help generate the other side of the business and develop the research for where we want to go with regenerative medicine. After that, we looked at reformulating drugs, so solid dose to liquid dose drugs that were already on the market for a smaller patient population. Say someone intubated who couldn't swallow a pill, they would take a liquid formulation.
That was all, I would say 2014 to 2018, what Andrew's
Okay, so
describing.
4 years,
So 4
all out of the
years.
United States.
4 years of that. That was
But you
inside.
guys were working in the United States.
That was inside the United States, the stuff I just described. And then in 2018, like we mentioned, we bought the assets from a PE firm of a tissue bank down here. And that's when we divested those other assets and started focusing on regenerative medicine type products, or what we're doing now is perinatal tissue allografts.
And then explain the distribution now, right? So in 2018, you did this. Like, how is it distributed, right? If I have an open wound on my knee, right? I'm trying to keep this very simple. I'm like, I research your company. I'm like, oh my God, I need this. Like, this is the best thing, out there on the market. Like, where do I go next, and how is it performed?
Yeah, I'll let Jason take this one. We don't have a commercial that says "Ask your doctor," but I'm sure that's where it'll go.
Because a lot of our listeners are everyday people.
Yeah.
They're hearing this, and I want to really kind of break it down to simplicity.
It's actually some of the challenges that a lot of companies face, whether they're medtech, et cetera, is distribution, right? Because there's a lot of regulatory pathway, or I'll call it regulatory constraints, from either FDA, CMS, other federal agencies to regulate how products get sold and distributed. Right now we work through a model of internal W-2 sales force that work with hospital facilities, whether it be, for example, Broward Health, Baptist, et cetera, down here locally.
Okay.
And those facilities purchase our product and then have it on the shelf. And then a physician needs to use it. They work with that patient to apply the product onto the patient. And then it typically gets bundled either into their insurance or et cetera.
So your clients, the hospitals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, informing them of this product, and then it's their job to then pass it over to the doctors.
Yeah.
And teach them. Or
Yeah.
do you also teach the doctor simultaneously, because it's on the shelves, but it's like they need to actually know to use it, or no? Or it's more like you just get it in the hospital's hands. They take it from there.
It's a good question. There's so much forward education you can do that's within the bounds.
People are set in their ways. That's why I say that,
yeah.
especially medical professionals.
Yeah.
They use the same product all the time, right? And then, switching. I mean, there's been a lot of movies on this, right?
Yeah.
I forget that movie where it was Viagra versus the other one. And then he started like have to go in and move it.
Yep.
right? As an example.
I think one of the things we've done to kind of grow the company recently, and you're asking about distribution, kind of where Jason's going, is it's not necessarily direct education of individual doctors, but going to conferences that are about wound care, going to these society meetings, things like that. We do a lot of generation of scientific evidence or scientific data. And that's what's kind of accelerated us and made our product a little bit stand out in the market. So our scientist, Dr. Weston, that Jason mentioned, she goes and presents at a lot of these conferences. She goes and presents to a lot of doctors about the scientific evidence we've developed in the processing technology and things like that. So I think that's what gets the word out there. Distribution wise, yeah, it's to hospitals or individual physicians.
So it's less the patients actually saying I should use this product. It's the doctors recommending it, right? I have a wound, I go to the hospital, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is the best product for it. It sounds like, right?
Correct.
It's not there. So you don't have a need as much on consumer basis to push social media so much. It's more going to the conferences and educating.
Health economics.
Gotcha.
A hospital facility says, okay, if I use this product, I'll save X amount of dollars because the patient doesn't come back, reoccurrence, do they end up getting an infection, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. We've had a lot of guests on the Shrimp Tank that have struggled to get into hospitals because, they're ran like public companies, right? And it's really hard to change their mind, even though, this water bottle is, 10 times better than the water they serve. It's 5 cents more. They're like, it's going to hurt our bottom line. We don't see the bigger benefit. We've heard from a lot of our guests. So completely understand your business model now. We're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors. And then we get back, we're going to jump into our What's Hot segment of the show.
Join the fastest growing community of professionals on the internet with OWL. Access new networks and otherwise unreachable professional contacts through the one-on-one call feature on the app. Scroll through the list of available professionals and join them for a quick call to build rich connections, expand invaluable relationships, and to broaden your professional landscape without needing lofty referrals. OWL. We bring vetted pros to your doorstep 24/7 on demand. Join our community by signing up at owl.com today.
You're good, Kevin.
Welcome back to this episode of the Boca Raton Shrimp Tank at Florida Atlantic's Adams Center. So our guests today have a really interesting medical solution for those customers that are a little bit older, that are dealing with wounds, and they've got something great. But I wonder if they know about other we were talking in the last segment about some of these alternative pathways. So in this segment of the show, we talk about what's hot. I wonder if you're familiar with some of the other new treatments, right? Getting creative and using different pathways for approval in the US. Some of our local health spas and treatment spas are doing all kinds of different treatments. What's hot in that area from your perspective, if you're familiar?
Are you talking specific to wound care or just general?
No,
what's
not
hot?
to wound care, right? Talk about something that maybe Jason and I can benefit from. They're doing these all kinds of things with blood spinning and plasma, and they can kind of do whatever you want if you're using your own blood. Supposedly, make your knees young. I don't know if any of it's true. It's all
B12 shots.
B12 shots.
What's
I went in the mall the other week. There's facility after facility. Med spas are popping up on every corner.
Yeah, I don't know too much detail about it. I know there's ozone therapy. I know I'm familiar with PRP. You mentioned one thing I'll pick up on that is it makes your knees young. You have to remember that also if you are using your own blood, you're using the cells or whatever they would get from your body that's already aged to a certain point.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily young. That's kind of what's exciting more about the perinatal side of things is if you do happen to go get a drug approval through the FDA, which takes a few years and millions of dollars. If it is cellular based, you're using cells that were, day one, I guess you could say. So you're kind of full circle of life there. So I think the hottest thing is all the benefits of regenerative medicine and perinatal tissue. I'm obviously somewhat obligated to say that because of my company, but there's a lot of different things out there that you can do. I'm just not too familiar with or really comfortable with my level of knowledge to go into them.
Yeah, I think there's, looking at maybe outside of, call it the med spa arena, but even here locally, like Andrew was alluding to earlier, there's an organization, a company in Miami. It's based out of Miami University called Longevron, which is interesting organization that is using culture expanded bone marrow stem cells to treat rare indications. And this morning they announced they got an RMAT approval for Alzheimer's treatment with these types of stem cells, which is pretty cool.
That's great news. Yeah.
So, and they're working also on age related diseases, like, anti-aging esque things. So it's kind of cool. I mean, here in South Florida, there's a lot of regenerative medicine companies that are working on different facets of either cell therapies or viral vector based products, etc. So,
All right, let me ask you one more question. It might be a little bit harder given your status as a public company. I know there's
I'm looking at the stock
and
right now.
guidelines, and so I'll ask, what's the hottest thing on your horizon? Is there a new prototype, a new product in the lab? You want to break any news on the Boca Raton shrimp tank for us?
Andrew?
Yeah, no one wants to answer this question, but yeah. So something we kind of recently announced more on a investor call, but that's really exciting. It's not. I mean, there is definitely products in development and some pathways we're traveling down to go outside of just tissue allografts. So formal approval from the FDA on certain things. But our one of our goals as a public company, we've been historically listed on the OTC market, so over the counter lower tier exchange. One of our goals is to meet the requirements to be able to go to a national listed exchange. So something we recently have been working on and kind of announced is that we'd be filing a submission to do that. So we've been working pretty heavily on getting that stuff done. Things like getting 2 years of PCAOB audits, establishing certain boards, corporate governance structures, things like that in order to meet those requirements. So that's something we've talked about and is a little forward looking that some people can insinuate on what the goal is there.
Yeah, I think also too, just to add to that, today we announced, our Amnio Rep 2 product line just got an IRB approval to launch our diabetic foot ulcer study. So what that means for us is an organization to start actually doing a randomized controlled trial around the use of our Amnio Rep 2 product line to treat diabetic foot ulcer patients. We're going to leverage that data to, work towards getting commercial payer coverage, not just Medicare payer coverage. Folks like United, and Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, et cetera, supposedly Medicare Advantage plans, things of that nature. So the focus there is to really demonstrate, and getting back to Jason's question about, timeline and how we've worked towards developing, the company or business lines, et cetera. Something that we did from 2018 until kind of now is probably 18, 19, 20, obviously is COVID land, and our products are used mostly in outpatient settings. So obviously that really stifled growth and sales and everything else. But it gave us an opportunity to kind of reflect and figure out ways to develop a better technology platform, and looking at competitors and things of that nature. So we actually developed what we call is BioRetain. It's a unique processing methodology that we've developed with Dr. Weston, and we've developed a way to retain all the natural properties of perinatal tissue. I like to use an analogy, as we alluded to earlier, the product has to be considered a structural tissue allograft, meaning a structure, right? So there's two ways you can build a sandwich, right? You can build a sandwich with Wonder Bread, which has the structural ends, which are the white, denatured structural pieces. Or you could build it with really healthy, whole grain, natural, all the amazing elements of bread as a structural piece. And that's kind of how we view BioRetain. It's the all natural whole grain elements. It still serves as a structural, but it has all the natural properties inside of it. So
thanks for breaking that down in a way we could follow. I like that, Sam. What questions do you have, Mr. Advisor?
Well, I was just looking up, on Yahoo Finance, the stock, it's done quite well, So what was hot about going public? It seems like you took over this company in
Capital
2018, 2019. It looks like that's when it happened. And we have very few companies go public. So talk to us about it.
Yeah, we actually acquired it as a public entity. So talking about being amazing, crazy entrepreneurs.
That is
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
We rarely hear this.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So Andrew and I and his father actually acquired the controlling interest of public entity.
Now, did anyone have any experience?
Zero, of course.
No one did.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So
there's a lot of rules, regulations.
Yeah, yeah. And Andrew and I spent a lot of time learning about the do's and don'ts and how to figure out how to not only run a business and learn how to run a business and develop a business and grow a business at the same time, be a public entity at the same time. So it's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, to say the least. Running into brick walls.
It's hard to
constantly.
follow all the regulations. There's so
Yeah.
many. You need good attorneys.
Yep.
You just need good advisors
Costs.
by your side. Good board members.
Yep.
So is this something you worked with the existing board and the current management team, or was this more of like the hostile takeover scenario?
Yeah, it would be more attributable to a hostile takeover scenario. It wasn't really a hostile takeover. It's the same function of how you would do something like that, by buying the controlling interest, being able to vote and change rules based on that, of shareholder votes. So conceptually it's the same, but it's not how we went about it. We just purchased it from the previous owners, but from there we started developing all the things you're talking about, a board and whatnot. Again, being on OTC and not fully reporting, all those requirements weren't requirements until you get to a certain point.
Can you just speak to the requirements? Because I don't think many people understand what this really means. Like you bought it, and most people aren't going down the journey that you've done buying a public company. Like, what were the requirements, and what did you not expect? I guess you kind of jumped into this. Like, we'll learn as we go, but kind of speak to it for a moment.
Yeah. I mean, initially, obviously, there's public requirements in regards to stating to the public domain with any sort of material change within a certain period of time, right? So if you make material business decisions or changes in executive management, boards, et cetera, share structure, offerings, et cetera, you have to announce that at certain periods of time. Uniquely, I think one thing I guess maybe is an interesting point about our journey is that we started with what's called an alternative reporting entity, meaning we don't have to file with the SEC or through the Edgar system all the Qs, Ks, and things of that nature that a normal public company would have to file. That was, I guess, one saving grace, because we could leverage some of the alternative reporting rules through OTC markets. I don't know, Andrew, you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I think like Jason's saying, it was a blessing, and we've talked to a lot of people with experience along the way, or surrounded ourselves with people to benefit us and benefit the company and shareholders at large. But like you mentioned, not many people start off public. So we kind of got baptized by fire, for lack of a better term, and had to figure it out very quickly. But as you grow, like Jason's mentioning, we were alternative reporting. So you're not necessarily required to do certain things that you would see a NASDAQ or a new NYSE company do. However, when you are on NASDAQ or NYSE, to answer further your question about what other requirements, so you have to have a certain majority independent number of board members. So your board has to be made up of majority independent members. You have to have established an audit committee, a corporate governance committee, a compensation committee, and they approve pretty much everything you do. And as CEO and COO, we kind of follow direction of the board and report to them. But it's also, like Jason mentioned, when some material change of the company happens, you have to announce that within a certain amount of days. There's a lot of rules and regulations around what officers and directors, or us as individuals specifically, can and can't do when it comes to that public domain side too. So yeah, a lot of legal work and a lot of attorney's fees.
Yeah. Audit fees, attorney's fees, it's not cheap.
Well, that's why.
That's another thing.
Yeah,
that's another thing Jason talks about.
Public, so that way you could stay in business, right?
Exactly. Quarterly audits, annual audits. Yeah.
Nice. Kevin, you got anything else? We get to our next segment of the show. Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Hear from our sponsors. When we get back, we're going to jump into our Plead the Fifth segment of the show.
Step into our state-of-the-art innovation lab and create your digital future. Oz uses cutting-edge technology and 22 years of industry knowledge to enhance customer experience through digital innovation in a variety of expertise. Oz is a leading global consulting company whose services and solutions are trusted by startup, midsize, and even Fortune 500 companies. Get to know more about Oz's Salus, a mobile solution bringing us back to max capacity, and their latest solution, Rainmaker, saving insurance companies years of work. To learn more about Oz and their exciting technologies, visit followoz.com. That's FOLLOWOZ.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. If you're just listening to the audio version, pop on to our YouTube account and watch the video version, because we replaced our Shrimp Tank banners with their banners, and it really explains the product in more detail. So people like me who are like, kind of like, what is going on here with tissue? And you start reading like line by line, starts making a lot more sense, of course. Okay. Jason, Andrew, this is our favorite segment of the show, of course, called Plead the Fifth. We're going to ask you a question. You don't want to answer it. You just say those words, I plead the fifth. But you guys can only plead the fifth one time.
Oh boy.
If you plead the fifth 2 times, you're going to have to pay for the parking spot outside for the next 12 months.
12 months.
And we'll allow you to brand it, but it's going to, of course, have the shrimp tank on it. So that way I could park every single week without having to feed the meter.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that deal?
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Okay. We got a sponsor for the spot. We're going to make them plead the fifth twice. Okay. Let's see. Andrew, what is your biggest pet peeve of working with Jason?
Communication.
Ooh, explain in more detail. What is his communication style like? He doesn't text you back. He doesn't call you back right away. He doesn't email you back for 4 days. What's the problem?
I think it's just more interpretation when it comes back to communication. So we'll both take something. It's a blessing and a curse, or a pet peeve, I guess you could say, is we both listen to a meeting or are involved in a meeting and take 2 separate things out of it. So sometimes you have to either, negotiate, argue to get to a middle ground and agree to something, or you can look at it as a benefit and saying there's.
So he's a bit stubborn. Sounds like he's like,
He
this
can be
is
a little bit
it. This is how I interpret it. And you're like, you're not even listening to me.
Correct.
That's what we're speaking about.
I think there's a term
we
that
get there
says
somewhere.
already always listening.
Yes,
is
that is
the term.
term I've.
Okay, well, Jason, I'm
Jason,
going to
no.
give you a free shot. What's your biggest pet peeve working with Andrew?
That's a good question. Pet peeve.
He doesn't want to say it. That's the truth. He's got it in there.
Just
He's
lay
like,
it out.
"Oh, I should say
No.
this on the air.
Just
This
lay
is
it out.
my friend, my buddy for a
There's
little.
always room for
very long
improvement,
time."
Jason.
I know. Man.
Is it his tattoo? I don't know. What is
No, definitely not. I'm just trying to think of something that's pet peeve. I think the biggest thing, well, I don't even know if it's called a pet peeve. That's kind of an interesting term to use. Which actually I think is a compliment to how we work so well and how well we've gotten to this point. Is Andrew is very by the book, black and white. There's zero down the middle, or I'll call it modulation or gray area. It's either black or white. And so, but frankly, actually, I think that's what gotten us to this point, is because I'm a little bit more on the visionary, imaginary side, and Andrew is very either left or right, black or white. And so that it's a good yin and yang between the two of us, to be honest. And it's allowed us to get to this point.
Well, yeah, and that kind of is complementary to what he said. That kind of fits well together, but can signal how some conflicts might occur. Right?
Yeah. We're pretty direct communicators between the two of each other, so it's entertaining for some employees when they're in the line of fire, or line of sight.
All right, so I've got a question that I'm just curious about. If we get rid of all the complicated science and details and kind of break it down to the basic business model, right? You have raw materials that you need to produce your products that are very unique, and I imagine valuable, and in somewhat limited supply, right? So how did you get that relationship with the group in Tallahassee? Is it very competitive to get these stem cells? Are they very expensive? What is that market like?
Yeah, it's not specifically cells we're getting, but tissue in general. The market is somewhat competitive, especially the adoption of this technology or these types of products. There's other companies that do exactly what we do, in a different way, different than how we process it. But a lot of companies are vying for these donors. We fortunately started the company at what was kind of the influx, or when the growth started happening. So we've established long-term relationships with a lot of these people. Also through the acquisition of the company that we acquired, the tissue bank, in 2018, some of those relationships came along with it. So rather than having to establish stuff or start from square zero, we were fortunate enough to purchase some of those things that you could kind of purchase as part of the assets as well. But Jason and I have worked recently, especially with the expansion, to actually have more of a personal relationship. These companies are all over the country. We work with 5 different recovery agencies, and actually going to the facilities, talking to them, sitting down with them, discussing our future plans, their future plans, seeing how we can kind of help each other out. Like the term goes, rising tide lifts all boats. And that's what we want for the industry. We want everyone to kind of do better, and do better for the patients or customers, as you would put them. But yeah, patients at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So-
I think to add to Andrew's point, there is a lot of a lot of this material sadly goes to medical waste. So there's a lot of forward education, not only on our side, from a patient perspective, but then also from the recovery side, right? Working with an OBGYN with a prospective mother about the gifted donation and honoring the gifted donation, something that we cherish and really are focused on. Being a part of what's called American Association of Tissue Banks is an independent accreditation that our facility has. It's one of 34 facilities here in the United States. Andrew's team and Andrew himself have taken an accreditation
Yeah,
called
certified tissue bank specialist.
and a lot of our manufacturing quality team members have that certification as well. And it's truly honoring, no different than a gift of an organ like a kidney or heart or a lung or anything like that. A placenta is an organ as well, and we truly try to maximize the output, meaning what we manufacture and get the most out of that gift, but then also honoring that gift as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
well-
general good stewardship of tissue.
Yeah, that's excellent. But at the same time, I feel like it's a pretty easy pitch, and it's really all about kind of disseminating the information. Because if like the other option is, well, it gets thrown out as medical waste, I feel like most people would be like, well,
You would assume safely, right? But I think logic doesn't always apply to certain settings. And like I think you mentioned earlier about
you wouldn't want to pitch it in the moment.
no, not in the moment. They're usually
Yeah.
approaching second or third trimester, but
But
yeah, you would think. I mean, it's a lot of doctors too. I mean, imagine being an OB and you're inside a delivery room or inside an OR delivering a baby or doing a C-section, right? And the last thing you want is another person or another body, another group of hands or a voice in that room while you're extremely focused on making sure you take care of the baby and the mother at that point. So being able to accomplish that, the safety protocols, just getting into the hospital system, I think is the biggest thing from a tissue or looking at it as otherwise discarded as medical waste. That is very easy way to sell it or to promote it. But the technicalities of it and actually, I guess the logistics of it becomes a little bit more difficult.
And I think also to Andrew, to add to Andrew, the donor actually has to go through a significant medical and social history report. So they have to actually fill out a lot of data and information about themselves. Andrew could kind of articulate some of the unique aspects of what rules in a donor and what rules out a donor.
Yeah, it's similar like giving blood. If you've traveled to a certain area, prison, if you've been in prison for a certain amount of time, if you've had any kind of STI within a certain period of time, if you've been in a hospital setting or received a blood transfer or whatnot, there is a lot of stuff. And, just like we were saying on the doctor side, the mother side, they're going through a lot at that time. They're in and out of the hospital, filling out a lot of paperwork, getting prepared for bringing a baby into the world. Another piece of documentation isn't always what they want to see.
Yeah, all right. That's a fair point. I'm glad you kind of explained all those details for the listeners out there. So there's been a lot of development in artificial tissue of various types, not in Florida, obviously, but is there anyone working on developing artificial tissue that you might be able to utilize?
When you say artificial, what do you mean specifically?
Some synthesized product.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do have collagen-based grafts that are synthesized collagen. So they grow them like that. More interestingly, they've started to grow heart valves from stem cells, original stem cells. So there is some artificial type tissues, but those have a different place. Our product specifically is considered advanced wound care. So if a patient has a chronic wound where it's not healing within 30 days, that's when something like this steps in. So there's a lot more advanced treatments. If this product wasn't to work or earlier on in the stage, you can use those synthetic grafts.
Nice. Jason, what else?
I got to get him to plead the fifth, right? So, of course, I'm going back to the stock chart for a second, right? 'Cause some of this is very public. So we could ask some details on the financials that you don't want to answer. So, I looked 5 years in the past, and this thing's up over 800%, Kevin. Right. This means these guys' net worth probably skyrocketed. They own a lot of the shares. It doesn't publicly show their percentage of shares. But I guess I got to ask if this company is doing over 50 million in revenue, correct? Or
On a run rate basis.
okay. So I guess and you don't have to answer this or plead the fifth, but based on the current stock price, what is each of your net worths?
Oh, geez.
And you each have to answer or plead the fifth based on if it was sold tomorrow at the current stock price.
Yeah.
Usually it's publicly listed.
Yeah,
We'll
this-
see like the stock. but I
if you were to
you
have a
guys
little more time or
don't
dig a
have
little
to
farther,
you don't have to disclose it publicly on like Yahoo Finance, but maybe you could dig and find it, of course.
Yeah.
yeah, correct. I mean, I'll answer it. I won't plead the fifth. I'm not trying
Sure.
to pay for a parking spot. So my net worth not high enough to want to pay $660 for a parking spot. But I will answer your question. So if you had a little more time or looked into the details of
Sure.
stuff, between 11 and 12% of the company each of us own.
Okay.
Man, open book. They really, really
I
don't.
kind of didn't answer the
spot.
question.
Well, I mean, I think you look
I
at you
think we
can
kinda
you
have
can
an
figure
idea.
It
out.
changes by the minute.
Yeah,
you
it changes.
can't-
Yeah,
I don't want to
today-
give you a wrong
So
number.
give us
Yeah.
the number. You already said that, so don't let our audience guess. Okay, is that like
We got to make them work a little
3
bit.
million, 7 million? Just we see the amount. I didn't look at the outstanding shares to calculate that.
Yeah, there's about 16.7 million shares outstanding. So,
You
and
guys know this number. Come on.
Andrew and I
Come on.
on a fully diluted
They're holding back,
basis,
Kevin. See this? They're
Only about
they're
20,
like we kind of answered the
25%.
question.
So, yeah.
You could plead the fifth right now if you don't want to answer. Remember, you have two plead the fifths. This will just be one.
Oh, this is one.
Yeah, you plead the fifth twice.
Huh,
That's
Yeah, I'll take the plead the fifth on
okay,
this.
we got
one.
one.
same.
Okay, we got him. Okay, now Kevin, it's all yours.
I don't know. They're a pretty open book. We asked
One question each left because that will be fair. You get one, I get one, and then this parking spot, if I get them, is all mine.
What's the hardest thing about doing business with your dad involved?
Yeah. Family ties are difficult. Jason and I, this isn't your question, but I'll get there. Jason and I have known each other since I was about 12 or 13. He was a few years older than I. So we have a similar family kind of relationship. The hardest thing about your dad is it's someone you want to listen to. I don't have kids yet, but I know I was recently, 15, 20 years ago living under my father's roof. And it's also the person you want to attract a lot of good qualities from, but also the person you're most willing to beat down because he's the closest to you and he's going to love you no matter what, that unconditional love. So I think the hardest part is trying to temper that inside a business setting and not let that get out of hand. I know there's definitely a few times where I blew up past professionalism at my father in a business setting. And I think that was the hardest part, is trying to tame my enthusiasm for certain arguments we had.
All right, fair enough. Jason?
Okay, I see Panthers here. I see Packers. So I got to go after this because I could see, Jason kind of slid in the Packers. Are you guys from
I'm from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Okay. And I see Andrew. How are you then a Packer fan? Because
He's
Andrew,
a shareholder.
Yeah, I bought a share a few years ago. Jason told me you could buy a share of a team, and I just wanted to say I was an owner of an NFL team, so that's the reason I like them.
okay. So
He actually watches the Dolphins more than the Packers, to be
Yeah.
honest. But
This guy owns part of a football team.
yeah,
Along
with like
parking
an
space.
You can too for about $250.
Yeah, along with a bunch of other people.
You cannot trade it, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can't do anything with it.
Oh,
Put it
great.
on
It's
the
a ni-
wall.
it's a
that's
nice
about it.
picture.
Stock in the startups that I have.
Yeah.
It's not worth a lot.
Yeah, the wallpaper, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Save those for future losses.
okay. I'm trying to form a question around the Packers and the Panthers. But
Well,
let's see
I would
your-
appreciate the Panthers since Lord Stanley's over here finally after 30 plus years.
Okay, your company mission is, products that change lives, right? If your company gets this size, right, where you could exit, make enough capital to buy the Packers, right? And you had no choice. You had to sell the company. You knew it was going in the direction. It was changing many, many millions of lives. But you're like, but once in an opportunity of a lifetime to buy the Packers, what do you do? And you have to answer. You can't say I would do both. No bullshit. You just have to pick one. Which one? You sell it, buy the Packers, or you unfortunately have to make the hardest decision of your life and pass. What do you do? And each you answer the question or plead the fifth.
I'd sell it and buy the Packers.
Yeah, I'd say the same.
Oh, it's just a financial question.
I would say the
Football
Panthers
team's
or the
great.
Packers, but that's my opinion.
But you'd sell your company. I'm talking about selling your current brand. If it
Yeah.
was doing that gross revenue that you could exit, obviously. We're
Yeah.
talking at that point $1 billion plus, right?
Yeah.
Technology's out there at that point, treating and changing lives. So I'm buying the
A new
Packers.
CEO could take over
Yeah.
and continuously change lives.
Yeah.
Correct.
We'll change more lives with the money. So it's okay.
We can get back in when we sell the Packers.
Good answer. Good answer. Okay. That was a softball. Well, guys, thanks for joining us here on the Shrimp Tank today. For our audience listening, if they want to get in touch with your company or you guys personally, like where do people find you? On your LinkedIn, for example, your website directly? What are the best routes?
Yeah, on website and LinkedIn, both Andrew and I have a LinkedIn profile, and info at Biostem Tech is a good inbox for shooting us questions, fielding resumes, etc.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us here on the Shrimp Tank. Everybody listening, if you want to buy that parking spot for me, just reach out to me, Jason at shrimptankboca.com. Shoot me an email. Later.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.